Hi, my name is Brenda Williams, and I will be giving a presentation on Chapter 9, Intercultural Communication Ethics. My chosen topic is culture shock. And as we get started, let's talk about culture. What is culture? Well, I went ahead and looked it up, and I have the Business Dictionary definition of culture. Culture is broadly social heritage of a group, organized community, or society. It is a pattern of responses discovered, developed, or invented during the group's history of handling problems which arise from interactions among its members and between them and their environment. What is culture shock? Culture shock from the text is a feeling of disorientation experienced when encountering communicative events disruptive of one's expected routine. The textbook goes on to explain that culture shock occurs when we encounter the unfamiliar. Culture shock can take place on the first day of school, the first day of a new job, or as we meet new cultures contrary to our own, willingly or unwillingly. So, meeting the unfamiliar helps us learn about other cultures while finding out more about our own. And additionally, I feel that when we are meeting the unfamiliar and exposing the truths about a given culture, this may help change the behavior of the said culture. Now, when we think of culture shock, I think it's easiest to think of culture shock being as when you travel to another country and you're shocked by the unfamiliar sounds, the languages, the foods. When I did my research, all I could see of when I looked up culture shock was the travel abroad. But we don't necessarily have to travel abroad to experience culture shock, do we? The book talks about you experience culture shock when you go to a new university and you're among a diverse group of students of different nationalities, political perspectives, and religious orientation. The book explains this in greater detail and gives some awesome examples. The book also discusses culture shock on the first day of a new job. The film we will look at is 7 Seconds. I wanted to look at this film in particular because these stories are becoming a little all too familiar. And I think that if we can identify and expose the issues within a given culture, we can learn from them. 7 Seconds is a new Netflix series. It tells the story of a police cover-up. Britton Butler, a black teenager from Jersey City, is accidentally hit and critically injured by a car driven by a white police officer. Police are called to the scene, assume he's dead, and a cover-up ensues. Racial tension explodes in the face of injustice and the absence of a quick resolution of the case due to the cover-up and the corruption on the police task force. After we watch this clip, I will break down the clip and apply the textbook meaning of the word culture shock. In addition to the clip, I will discuss a peer-reviewed article and will examine culture shock a little further.
In the trunk. D. You talk to your wife yet? Where's she going? No one saw you, right? Yo, D. That's what's gonna happen. You're gonna leave right now. Go. D, what?
No, we gotta call it in.
He's dead. There's nothing you can do for him. Did you go over there? Did you see what's in that ditch? They're gonna crucify you for this. boss is gonna pay for this. You understand what I'm saying, right? No one's gonna find him here, Dee. No one's gotta know. Hey, hey.
I said I got this. Get to the hospital. Go be with your wife.
Drive away.
In the film 7 Seconds, we'll use the new guy as an example of culture shock. In this film, we have the new guy, Pete Jablinski, a police officer that has just been transferred from a different precinct, from, I guess, they would call the better side of town. Pete Jablinski seems to be a stand-up guy, an officer of the law, an officer that took an oath to protect and serve, and was diligent about his duties and followed proper police protocol. Well, in the beginning, after Pete hits the young man, Pete immediately calls his supervisor. He was in a panic, yes. He wasn't sure what to do. He wanted help, but I don't think he intended for his supervisor to cover up the accident. His supervisor followed his routine of doing what he does best. He cleans up the accident. Pete looks to his supervisor, and he is a bit shocked that they weren't going to follow proper protocol or routine by calling it in. You briefly see this in the scene, but more in the film you'll see how Pete struggles with the decision to cover it up, and that there is even a point where he almost turns himself in. We find that Pete is shocked by the new cop culture that he now belongs to. He now belongs to a brotherhood that stands together. They cover up their mistakes and wrongdoings and pardons their crimes. Culture shock is a natural reaction to the unexpected and unfamiliar, and a pragmatic reaction to culture shock is learning. In this slide, I wanted to discuss two of the articles that I read. One being the article about cop culture or police culture, and then the other article having to do with the alternative view of culture shock. The cop culture, I felt that it was necessary to address because it is something that's real and it is upon us. There were many different articles that discuss police culture. However, I found a great book called Crossing the Threshold by Diane Wittendorf. This book breaks down police culture as a whole. It explains the brotherhood, the stick-togetherness, the good versus bad. The brotherhood fosters the them versus us mentality. And we witness this in the film in the very beginning when the supervisor says to him, "They will crucify us for this." There's the code of silence. When an officer is in trouble, they stick together. They stick to the story and they say as little as possible. And you find this out in the film when they go to investigate what happens, and you will find that there is not an officer that knows any or has any information, or they're just unwilling to discuss anything about the case. There's police discretion. The symbol of brotherhood entitles offenders with professional courtesy, which means, if you're a part of my brotherhood, regardless of your crime, you'll get a pass. And then the book discusses discrimination. The book discusses how the official rosters rarely reflect the community's demographics. That would explain the police culture. Now, the transitional experience, the alternative view of culture shock. Now, this article I felt supports the idea that you don't have to go abroad to experience culture shock. We have these experiences within our own homes, within our jobs, within the communities that we live in. I read from the text, one does not need to sojourn outside one's own country to experience culture shock or to undergo a cross-cultural experience. This article takes the alternative view of culture shock. It explains how we can experience culture shock within our own culture. It is the phases, the difficulties involved, and the consequences of our experiences. However, are most readily understood in the cross-cultural experience where psychological, social, and cultural differences are more distinct. The book gives more examples of culture shock. It could be a parolee out on parole, coming out of prison. It could be a divorcee experiencing life after being married. There are so many other ways that we experience culture shock, and I felt that it was necessary to not just look at culture shock as being traveling from one country to another, but I thought that it would be necessary or good to look at culture shock as we experience it within our own homes. Thank you for viewing my vlog. Please feel free to leave any questions or comments, and you will find the references and resources that I used in this vlog on this slide. Thank you.